Nehemiah's story is one of courage, faith, leadership, and restoration, a powerful account of how one man's deep concern for his people moved him to take bold action in the face of overwhelming odds. Nehemiah was a Jewish man living in exile in Persia, serving as the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. This was a position of great trust, as he was responsible for tasting the king's wine to ensure it was not poisoned. Though he lived in the comfort and security of the royal palace, Nehemiah's heart remained with his homeland Jerusalem. One day, his brother Hanani arrived from Judah with troubling news. The walls of Jerusalem were still broken down, and its gates had been burned with fire. The city, once a symbol of God's glory and strength, lay in ruins. Its people were vulnerable, living in fear and disgrace. When Nehemiah heard this, he was deeply moved. He wept, fasted, and prayed for days, crying out to God for mercy and guidance. In his prayer, Nehemiah confessed the sins of his people, acknowledging that their disobedience had led to their suffering. Yet he also reminded God of his promises to restore his people if they returned to him. Nehemiah didn't just feel sorrow, he sought a solution. One day, while serving the king, Nehemiah appeared visibly sad. This was risky, as showing sadness before the king could be seen as disrespectful or even dangerous. But King Artaxerxes noticed and asked him why he looked troubled. With fear and courage, Nehemiah explained the situation in Jerusalem. He spoke of the broken walls and his desire to rebuild them. To his surprise, the king responded with compassion. He asked Nehemiah what he needed. After a quick prayer to God, Nehemiah boldly requested permission to go to Jerusalem and rebuild the city. He also asked for letters granting him safe passage and supplies from the royal forest for the construction. The king granted all his requests, showing that God's favor was upon Nehemiah. When Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem, he didn't rush into action. Instead, he quietly surveyed the damage at night, examining the broken walls and burned gates. He wanted to understand the full scope of the work before making any plans public. After assessing the situation, Nehemiah gathered the people and shared his vision. He spoke of God's hand upon him and the king's support. His words inspired the people, and they responded with determination. "Let us rise up and build." Together, they began the work of rebuilding Jerusalem's walls. However, the project faced fierce opposition. Local leaders, such as Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, mocked and threatened the builders. They ridiculed their efforts, saying the wall would never stand. But Nehemiah refused to be discouraged. He prayed for strength and encouraged the people to keep working. As the threats grew more serious, Nehemiah took practical steps to protect the workers. He stationed guards and organized the builders so that half worked while the other half stood watch. Those who worked carried tools in one hand and weapons in the other. Even in the face of danger, they remained committed to their mission. Despite external opposition, internal problems also arose. Some of the Jewish nobles were exploiting the poor, charging high interest and taking advantage of their fellow countrymen. When Nehemiah learned of this, he was outraged. He confronted the leaders and demanded justice, reminding them that such behavior was wrong and dishonored God. His firm leadership brought reform, and the people restored what they had taken. Nehemiah also led by example. As governor, he chose not to take the food allowance that others before him had claimed. Instead, he used his own resources to support the people, demonstrating selflessness and integrity. The enemies, seeing that the wall was nearly complete, tried to stop Nehemiah through deception. They invited him to meet them outside the city, intending to harm him. But Nehemiah recognized their scheme and refused to leave the work. He famously responded, "I am doing a great work and cannot come down." His focus and wisdom protected him from their traps. They also attempted to intimidate him with false accusations, claiming he was planning to rebel against the king. But Nehemiah stood firm, trusting in God and refusing to be shaken by lies. In an astonishing achievement, the wall of Jerusalem was completed in just 52 days. This was a remarkable feat, considering the challenges they faced. When their enemies heard of it, they were filled with fear, realizing that this work had been accomplished with the help of God. But Nehemiah's mission didn't end with the wall. He understood that true restoration required more than physical rebuilding it. required spiritual renewal. He gathered the people and called for the reading of the law of God. Ezra the scribe read from the scriptures, and the people listened attentively. As they heard God's word, they were convicted and began to weep. But Nehemiah encouraged them not to mourn, reminding them that this was a day of joy. "The joy of the Lord is your strength," he told them. The people celebrated, shared food, and rejoiced in God's goodness. In the days that followed, the Israelites renewed their covenant with God. They confessed their sins, committed to obeying His laws, and dedicated themselves to living faithfully. Nehemiah helped organize the community, appoint leaders, and ensure that the temple and city were properly maintained. Even after returning briefly to Persia, Nehemiah later came back to Jerusalem and found that some of the people had fallen into old habits. Once again, he took strong action, cleansing the temple, correcting abuses, and calling the people back to obedience. Nehemiah's story is a powerful example of what can happen when one person combines prayer, courage, and action. He was not a prophet or a priest, but a leader with a burden and a vision. Through faith in God and determination, he helped restore not just a city, but a people. His life reminds us that no matter how broken things may seem, restoration is always possible when we trust in God, take responsibility, and work together with purpose and perseverance.